Test 1 2. Test 1 2. Test 1 2. Test nothing. Everyone could please take. If everyone could please take your seats, we're about to begin.
coming. Chairman, how are you? Good to see you. Thank you for coming. Thank you. Hey, good to see you guys.
Thank you.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you. Thank you for coming. It's always good for me. You've started drinking before I get here, so that's good. Please be seated. Enjoy. Thank you all for coming tonight. I appreciate it. It's great to be back in New Hampshire. Good to be here to talk about a whole lot of different issues that we need to get to tonight. Most importantly, to get to your questions, because that's what I enjoy doing the most, and that's what teaches me about the things that you care about the most. So let's start off with a few things. Since it's topical, we'll only do this briefly. I am so glad I am not a member of the House of Representatives. On my way here, I talked to a couple of my friends who are members of the House of Representatives. One of them said to me, at this point, I'm ready to resign and just get the hell out of here. This is just ridiculous. It's embarrassing. It's embarrassing, first and foremost, to our party, that we were given the majority by the American people to govern with conservative principles. We can't get out of our own way. It's embarrassing to our country when folks in the world are suffering from some enormous crises and America can't act. Because for 3 weeks now, the House of Representatives has been closed. It's embarrassing to democracy. And, you know, all I could say about it is this, what I've said before, just pick someone. I don't care. I quite frankly don't care if they pick you. Not only it might be better, it would be better, it couldn't be worse. Someone from this room should just get in your car, drive to Washington, and say, look, you don't know me. That means you don't have any reason to hate me. Why don't you make me Speaker of the House? It's always great to see our former president and two-time nominee playing the extraordinarily constructive role he always tries to play by saying after Tom Emmer dropped out of the race today, I killed him. That was his quote. I killed him. Now, of course, he only had time to do that after he left his trial today, where he watched his former lawyer testify under oath that he regularly was instructed to lie by Donald Trump to increase fraudulently the value of his assets so he could make the Forbes 400 list. Because, of course, that's the most important thing in the world, is to be on the Forbes 400 list. Look, everybody, I had a reporter ask me today, like, when are voters going to start to understand some of this stuff? It is long overdue, and I'm not giving up or giving in explaining that I've known this guy for 22 years. He does not care about anyone other than himself. No one. He doesn't give a damn about this country, and his conduct every day proves he doesn't give a damn about this country. And when the House of Representatives can't elect a leader, instead of saying, you know what, this is what a real leader would do, I'm getting on my plane, I'm coming to Washington, I'm getting in a room with all 222 of you, and we're going to figure this out, and I'm not leaving until you pick someone. Instead, he's got to be up at his trial protecting his fake money. Instead, he calls reporters on background and says, I killed him. And talking about a guy who actually was trying to provide some leadership to the House of Representatives, and Tom Emmer, who's a guy I know and is a really good person. Whether you agree or disagree with all of his votes or all his politics, you know, I say this all the time. The only person you agree with 100% of the time is you. And me too. I only agree with me 100% of the time. And, you know, we shouldn't be having that test. And it's embarrassing. Why is it so dangerous, though? Because it goes beyond embarrassing. It's dangerous. And the reason it's dangerous is because Israel, our greatest ally in the Middle East, is in a war, is under siege, and needs help from the American people who are willing to give it, except the House of Representatives can't get a bill to try to help Israel. And look, people have asked me what my priorities would be as president regarding this crisis in Israel. They're very clear. There's three of them. One, Israel has to protect its territorial integrity and the safety of its citizens, first and foremost. And whatever they need to do that, we have to support them. Second, Israel has to have the ability to degrade Hamas's capability to do this again. And whatever they need to do that, we need to support and help them to do it. And third, we have to work to find a path to continue the progress we've been making towards having Israel make agreements with the United States and other Arab nations to isolate Iran. Because Iran is the country that is funding Hamas, militarily supporting Hamas with technology, and encouraging them to do this. So those should be the three priorities. And if I were president, I'd be on the phone with Prime Minister Netanyahu every day, making it clear to him that we'll support him unequivocally in those three priorities. And then let them make the decisions they need to make for their government and their people. I heard one of my opponents in this race today, the incredibly learned Vivek Ramaswamy, say no money for Israel. This is definitely the guy you want in the Oval Office, I can guarantee you. 38 years old with an 18-year-old mentality. And by the way, you know, you see other folks in this race, like Donald Trump, saying that Hezbollah is very, very smart and that the problem is Netanyahu. Well, why doesn't he like Netanyahu? Well, you know why. Because Benjamin Netanyahu had the temerity to call Joe Biden after the election in 2020, congratulate him on winning. And Trump hasn't forgiven him since. So instead of worrying about what's happening in Israel, once again, it's all about me when it comes to Donald Trump. Why else is the House of Representatives situation so dangerous? Ukraine. Now, understand, everybody, in my view, all of this is connected. Don't think these things are happening separately. You know, maybe it's because I'm from New Jersey and we're paranoid about everything. But I was taught at a very young age, there's no such thing as coincidences. And this stuff is connected. There are four bad actors in this world: Russia, China, North Korea, and Iran. And they are all four working together. China is funding the Russian war and invasion into Ukraine. And if you have any doubt about it, if you watched the news in the last week, you saw Putin and President Xi of China together, once again reaffirming there are no limits to the partnership between China and Russia. By the way, these are the pair that Donald Trump, Ron DeSantis, and Vivek Ramaswamy say, we'll just go talk to Putin and talk him out of being friends with China and be friends with us. Sure, two committed communist dictators. You're going to break them up because they find us, the biggest democracy in the world, more attractive. Sure. They're all connected. And if we don't stand up for Ukraine, we are not the country that we say we are. And let's remember two things. First and most importantly, in 1992, we made a promise to Ukraine. Very few people in this race are talking about this, but we need to talk about it. When the Soviet Union collapsed in 1991, there were Soviet nuclear weapons in Ukraine. The Ukrainians wanted to keep them in order to protect themselves against a future Russian invasion. The United States said, no, please return those nuclear weapons to Russia. And if you do, we promise we will protect you if the Russians invade you. Well, let me tell you, everybody, we made the promise. And they did their part of the bargain. They gave the nuclear weapons back to the Russians, and now those nuclear weapons are pointed at them. And we have people in our party who are saying we have no business helping Ukraine. If America's promises are worthless, we're going to run out of friends real fast in the world if you can't count on us when we give a word. And secondly, we have spent so far 5% of 1 year of the Pentagon's budget in helping Ukraine. 5% of 1 year of just the Pentagon's budget. And they have degraded 50% of the Russian military hardware. I don't know. Seems like a pretty good investment to me. And Barack Obama has not yet issued his apology to Mitt Romney when Romney said in 2012 the Russians are still our adversary. And you remember Obama said, Governor Romney, the 80s are calling and want their foreign policy back. Well, thanks for being such a smart ass, Mr. President. But you know what? You were wrong. And we're watching it play out right now. We're watching the Iranians give drone technology to the Russians to use against Ukraine. We're watching the North Koreans exchange missile technology with the Russians. We're watching it all happen right before our eyes. They're all connected. And we need to show that we will stand up for our friends in the world. And you know what? Sometimes it's not easy. But that's the price we pay for being the biggest, strongest, richest, freest country in the world. And if we want to remain that, then this is what we need to do. And the less we do it, the more others will fill that vacuum. And I don't want my grandchildren to live in a world that's dominated by the communist Russians and the communist Chinese. That's not a world I want my grandchildren to grow up in. And I don't think it's a world you want your children or grandchildren to grow up in either. So these things are important. And lastly, before I get to your questions, we've got a southern border that is creating a national security crisis for us. We don't know who's coming across. We just know that for the last 11 months, we have averaged 200,000 encounters a month. A month. And you know how many detention beds we have? 38,000. And we're having 200,000 encounters a month. So this is a complicated issue to fix the southern border. I know my buddy Ron DeSantis is up here today, wandering around New Hampshire. He says he's going to send the American army to invade Mexico. Well, there's a good idea for you. Because we don't have enough problems going on in the world. And old Ron is going to send the United States military over the border to invade our single biggest trading partner in the world. And a neighbor who we've gone without conflict with for, almost a couple hundred years. Or he says he'll have the army stay on our side of the border, but shoot them, his quote is, stone cold dead as they come across the border. Another fabulously smart idea. I mean, look, everybody, we're all angry about what's happened at the southern border. And we have a right to. Because we've been lied to now for a decade. Donald Trump stood in this state 8 years ago and said, I'm going to build a big, beautiful wall along the entire border of Mexico, and Mexico's going to pay for it. Now, I was on the stage. I knew it was bull when he was saying it. But people bought it, and they voted for him. And just 2 weeks ago, in a public speech, he said, well, how did anybody expect I would ever get a foreign government to pay for a wall on our side of the border? Oh, I don't know, because you said it about 8,000 times during the primary. We thought you had some damn idea of what you were talking about. Excuse us. We were stupid. We believed you. He built 52 miles of new wall in 4 years. Say this, if they knew we were only going to build 52 miles, they might have paid for it. They might have been willing to pay for that. Oh, 52 miles? We'll pick up the tab. He says, though, this time, if you let me go back, he'll do it this time. At that pace, he only needs another 110 years as president to build the entire wall. And while I'm sure he's convinced he's going to live to 187, he's not. Nor would we have him for president for that long. We don't need more lying and more easy answers to complicated problems. Here's what I would do. And none of this is easy. Number one, I'd sign an executive order on the first day to send National Guard down to our overwhelmed Customs and Border Patrol officers. They're overwhelmed because we don't have enough of them. So we need to send National Guard down there to help them to do the job of 200,000 encounters a day. Second, I would immediately ask for 10,000 new Customs and Border Patrol officers to be hired. That's not going to happen in 2 weeks. It's going to take a year to get them hired, get them trained, and get them deployed. Third, we do not have enough immigration judges in this country. And so what happens is people get captured, they claim asylum, our laws require them to get a hearing, and we tell them your hearing will be in 4 years. So we're going to release you into the United States and come back to El Paso in 4 years for your hearing. Sure they will. They've already been working for 3.5 years before they ever get to go back for a hearing, which they're never going to attend. So we need to triple the number of immigration judges. If we do that, we can bring the asylum hearing rate from 4 years to less than a year. Fourth, we need to double the number of beds that we have to detain people. Right now we have 38,000. We need 80,000 beds. Because for those people who are dangerous, who we don't want to release back into the country, we need a place to detain them while they wait to get their hearing and either get admitted into the country or sent back. We don't have nearly enough capacity to do that. And I'm going to start to answer that phone now. Who is calling? Who is calling you? If it rings again, I'm answering it. We're going to have fun. Won't that be their surprise of the evening? And fifth, yeah, I'm sure he's not calling me. I can guarantee you that. And definitely not Trump. I still have the number, but I don't think he's calling. I'll distribute it to all of you by the end of it. Remember, he did that to Lindsey Graham up here. Remember in 2016? He gave away Lindsey Graham's cell phone number. Poor Lindsey had every person in the world calling him. Maybe it's my time to do that to old Donald. So fifth, and most importantly, we need to change our immigration laws in this country to have a merit-based immigration system. And let me be clear about what I mean by that. We have 6 million open jobs in this country right now. In this economy, we have 6 million jobs that are open and have been open for quite some time. What that tells me is those are jobs that Americans either can't do or don't want to do. Well, if we're going to grow this economy, which we need to, then we need to get those jobs filled and get people working and paying taxes. And the way we've always done that in this country, every time we've had a time of significant growth, we have brought immigrants legally into this country to work, to pay taxes, and to become part of this country. And that's why we've grown faster and stronger and better than any country in the world. because we didn't have to recruit people to come here. They want to come here, but they need to be told the only way to come here is legally, and we're going to give you a path to get into this country. And by the way, if you have skills that we need right now, we're going to put you at the front of the line. And then we need to say to employers, when you hire somebody, you got to use E-Verify and make sure they're legal. Now, to get those two things that Republicans want, we're going to have to give the Democrats something. I don't know what, but we're going to have to, because you need 60 votes to pass any of this stuff in the U.S. Senate. So we're going to have to make a deal. And I'll end with that. There is no one better equipped in this race to do that than I am. I governed a blue state as a conservative Republican for 8 years with a Democratic legislature for every day, and I mean every day, of those 8 years. With a Senate president who was the head of the Ironworkers Union. Imagine that. And we made things happen because we made a deal with each other. That our job was to put touchdowns in the end zone, not to just make headlines. And sometimes I gave in, and sometimes he gave in. And I think I got better than I gave. And he'd probably admit that too. But you got to know how to do this. What's happening down in Washington right now is a symptom of this disease. The disease of I will never, ever listen to the other side or compromise with them in any way. Well, that's a dictatorship, everybody, and we don't have one, nor do we want one. And so we need someone who can do this. And the last time we were in a situation like this was the late 70s. Think about how familiar it is. High inflation, high interest rates, a sluggish economy, an energy crisis, raising prices, hostages in Iran, and the Soviets in Afghanistan. And a president at the time, in Jimmy Carter, who told us it was our fault. There was a malaise that we were suffering from, and it was our problem. I was 18 years old, off to college for my freshman year and ready to vote for the first time in a presidential election, and I was pretty hopeless. I was going to college in that environment thinking to myself, like, what am I going to have? And as I watched that pain and got my absentee ballot out in my dorm room at the University of Delaware, I voted for Ronald Reagan because he gave me hope. He made me believe that he would know how to fix this because he had fixed California, a blue state, as a conservative Republican, because he knew how to make government work. And for 8 years, that's exactly what he did. And the country has never been better than it was when Ronald Reagan left the presidency in 1989. And so we need to go back to that. We don't need a president anymore who's new at this. We've had Barack Obama and Donald Trump who are really new at it, and Joe Biden, who quite frankly is just too old to do it anymore. He just is. We need someone who can go there and do the job, and that's exactly what I intend to do. And the times are too dangerous. Too dangerous. But also too filled with opportunity for us to have it any other way. So we got a lot of other stuff to talk about, but those are the things that were on my mind in the beginning. You know how this works. It's pretty easy. Unlike other town halls that you may go to here in New Hampshire, you don't have to write your questions down beforehand and have them screened by my staff to see if they're simple enough for me to answer. You're not going to be restricted to just 3 questions tonight from people who I know. So I know that the questions will be okay. If you ask a tough question, I won't answer it and then just walk out because that was too tough and I need to go to bed. We're going to take as many questions as we could take tonight without keeping you here too long. And we're going to answer every one of them directly because that's the way I do things. I did 150 of these in my first term as governor of New Jersey. I did 100 of them the last time I ran here in New Hampshire 8 years ago. So if just from muscle memory I know how to do this. But the issues change, and I want to hear from you. So we have folks with microphones who will come around. So raise your hand. We'll start, ma'am, right back there with you. And he's coming. You got 2 microphones coming at you. There you go.
My name's Debbie, and I live in
Debbie.
Manchester. I'm a school teacher, and I teach 7th and 8th grade STEAM. Thank you. I think I need his blessing. Do you know what STEAM is?
Is that science, technology, engineering, math, and art?
Bingo.
Or art and math, in that order.
All right. The reason I asked that question is I have asked that question at every town hall I have gone to, and you were the first person that knew what they were.
That's because I'm a governor who was actually paying attention when I was there. Like
So
I used to pay attention in class. You would have liked me in the 7th, 8th grade.
I probably would
I
have.
was precocious, but pretty smart.
That's what I like.
Good.
So the other half of that question is, if you are going to be our next president, which would be a really awesome thing, how are you going to help the education system to understand that it's not about politics and it's not just about STEM, but it's about the whole child and the whole world?
Well, look, I think the only way to do that when you're president is to talk about it. Like, I'm a product of the public education system, right? And I got a great public education where I went to school. Very lucky. And I had wonderful teachers. And in fact, I did an event for WMUR when I was up here last week, and they asked me who, beside family members, who had been the most influential person on my life. And I said it was my 5th grade teacher named Mrs. Manishin. And for kindergarten through 4th grade, I got all A's. And then I went to Mrs. Manishin's class in the 5th grade. And we got an essay assignment in the first week. And we were turning it in on Friday. And I turned it in. And I got back there on Monday. And she gave out the essays. And I got a C+. And this was a completely debilitating moment for me. I didn't even know what that really meant, right? But all I knew was that it wasn't good. And I went up to her after school, and I said, Mrs. Manishin, I have never gotten a B, let alone a C+. Like, I said, now imagine, this is 5th grade. I said to her, you need to reread this. Because I'm pretty convinced this is an A. And she put her hand on my shoulder, and she said, Chris, I'm sure you're convinced it's an A. It's a C+. She said, now, I don't know what you've been getting A's for before my class. She said, but if you want to get A's in my class, you better get to work. It's a lesson my parents had taught me, obviously, but it was different when it comes from somebody else and someone you respect like your teacher. And the amazing thing is that about 4 weeks ago, I got a letter at home with a return address from Texas that I didn't recognize. Now, I get a lot of crazy mail at home, as you might imagine. So I opened it figuring it was going to either be someone asking me to autograph some stuff, which happens on a regular basis, or it was someone telling me that I was the worst human being on the face of the earth and I should just go away. It was neither. It was a letter from Mrs. Manishin. She is now 94 years old, and she saw me on TV, and she said to me, I'm very proud of you that you're running for president again and that you're standing up for what you think is right. That's the young man I knew in the 5th grade. And I tell all of my friends when we have breakfast together and we see you on TV, I taught that young man. A president needs to talk about those things, about how important education and teachers are in the lives of every one of our students, but also that education, and I tell my children this all the time, and I have this fight with Mary Pat, who unfortunately is not here tonight. She usually is with me all the time. But she went to our youngest son is now a coach and a teacher at his old high school. And they had a state tournament game today in soccer. And she said, I want to go and support the coach. So I'm with you all the time. I'm staying with the coach today. So our 23-year-old coach today, who won the game 7-1, I got informed on the way over here. So they had a great game. But we have this fight all the time because Mary Pat was a business major in college. and I was a political science major. I had a liberal arts degree. She had a very technical business degree. And I argue with her all the time that we have to expose our children to literature, to the arts. We have to do more than just teach them how to be technicians. We need to teach them how to think. Right. These things that are all part of the social sciences that we need to put more emphasis on. This day, someone will talk about a book or a poet, and I'll say, oh, yeah, I read that. And my wife will say, when did you read that? I've been with you for 37 years. I didn't see you read that. And I will often say I read it in high school or college. And we need to teach our kids that there's more to life than this. There's more that you can actually crack open a book, that not the entire world happens on television or streaming. And a president needs to talk about those things. It's not about the money. Look, we spend so much money on K-12 education now, as you know, $400 billion a year on K-12 education. And 39% of our eighth graders don't read at grade level. And 25% of our eighth graders don't do math at grade level. You know that that means that not only is that bad for our economy in the future, but much more drastically, I think, it's bad for our democracy. That's exactly right. It's exactly right. And that's what we're going to have, people who don't have an intellectual curiosity to want to learn more. And so that's the kind of stuff a president needs to be saying and talking about, and then reapportioning money to put it behind those type of things. And, you know, there should be competition in our education system. Parents should have choice. All those things are important too. But in the end, unless we talk about education as something that leads you to be a reasoning human being, above any technical skills you learn about how to code a computer or how to do a balance sheet or, you know, work Excel, all that stuff's important and people should learn it. But you also should read Shakespeare. Yeah. Glad I'm staying away from you. That's it. One Mrs. Manishin in my life was more than enough. And I would not be surprised if she's watching on live stream tonight. So if you are Mrs. Manishin, I know I deserve the C+. I know. Next question. Who's got one? In the back. Yes, sir.
Hi. Welcome back.
Thank you.
It's good to see you again.
Be here.
One of the questions that I have is that obviously we're going to have a lot of battles going to be happening throughout the whole thing. I mean, the world's kind of falling apart right now and stuff. The United States itself is going to be suffering from this MAGA environment for probably decades, who knows, you know, and stuff. We're kind of hoping it's going to clear up, but we know Trump's pretty much destroyed the GOP. And with you turning around, becoming president, and actually being the leader of the GOP, how do you turn around and fix all of this? Because Matt Gaetz actually turned around and did what he did. And now we've got a whole house that can't even turn around and decide what the hell they want to do. And we got the crazy eights running all over the place and stuff, trying to do everything and stuff. But it also showed how much of a bunch of cowards we have with the rest of the Republican Party down there, because they will not vote for us. They will not support us anymore. They're voting for whoever the hell knows. We've seen it here in New Hampshire, but we're also seeing it now in D.C. And I'm just kind of wondering, whoever is going to be president, hopefully it's going to, we know Biden can't do it, you know, and stuff, so we're hoping it's you. But how do you put this all back together again? Because the days of Reagan's and all this other stuff won't work because of the damage that's been done. So how do you go about doing that to put it all back together again so we have a true leader that everybody can actually support?
See, I'm not as pessimistic as you are. Because before Donald Trump came down that escalator in 2015, we weren't talking about any of this. And winning elections is what changes things. And you know those people you're talking about who won't do what they need to be doing? They need a president who will say, this is the direction we're going, and let's work together to do it. And right now, they don't have a president because Joe Biden's the president, and they're not going to follow his policies for good reason. But when Donald Trump was there, they didn't get anything done either. What happened when he was there? We added $7.8 trillion to the national debt. Why? Because that's what he wanted to do. We didn't build that wall. We didn't repeal and replace Obamacare, even though he promised that he would, and he had a Republican Congress to do it, because he's not a leader. He's a demagogue, not a leader. What leaders do is create relationships. Now, I talked about this a few times in the state, and I'll mention it again tonight. This is still a people business. This is still a people business. And everyone who's there, whether we like them or not, they all got elected by somebody in this country. And the president's job is to figure out how to try to work with them. And the only way to do that is to get to know them. And that's what I did in New Jersey. You know, like one of the silly things I did, which turned out to be really good. We have 120 members of our legislature, nowhere near what you got up here. I wouldn't have been able to do this up here. But in New Jersey, I had 120 members of the legislature. I called every one of them on their birthday, every year. And it led to a bigger conversation. It wasn't just happy birthday, goodbye. But we started to talk. And then I would invite them to my office. And I'd get to know them. I'd get to know who they were married to. If they had children, I'd hear about their children. I'd ask them, like, why did you come here in the first place? Like, what motivated you to run? What were you hoping to accomplish? What haven't you accomplished yet that you'd like to? How can I help you accomplish it? I spent more time with people I couldn't stand than I could count. Like, a lot of people were just not really very nice people, but they got elected too. I spent even more time with people I didn't agree with, but they got elected too. And when you're the governor, you have the greatest home field advantage in your state. I sat in the same office where Woodrow Wilson sat. And I used to remind everyone who came in of that. And they'd look around and I could tell. They'd all look around and go, ooh, maybe me. Maybe me someday. No, but today it's me, pal. So let's talk, right? If that's a good home field advantage, the Oval Office is the greatest home field advantage in the world. And you got to use it. And so is Camp David. And so is Air Force One. And so is Marine One. And all of those things that you can use to entice people to come and talk to you, to get to know you, and to break down some of the mystery. There is no silver bullet way to fix this problem. It is getting people to believe at core that you care about them, their problems, and their issues, and that you'll actually do something about it. And I'm not talking about the regular citizens. I'm talking about your representatives. And then it pans out from there. And it's hard work. And that's why Barack Obama didn't do it. Wasn't good at it. I mean, I dealt with him a lot, especially during Hurricane Sandy. I mean, he just doesn't like doing that stuff. Donald Trump's not good at it. Because you go and meet with Donald Trump, you got a half an hour, you spend 28 minutes on him, and then 2 minutes on you on the way out the door. And part of that 2 minutes is taken up by, do you want a picture with me? And Joe Biden, quite frankly, doesn't have the capacity to do it anymore. He just doesn't. He doesn't have the mental or physical capacity to do it anymore. And so we haven't had a president who's been willing to even try to do this since George W. Bush. And again, he came from a place of being a governor with a Democratic Senate, and he had to do it. You learn those skills when you have to, not because you want to, because you have to be successful. And that's the way we do it. And I don't think it's unfixable. If I thought it was unfixable, I wouldn't be here. I absolutely believe and know in my heart it's fixable. I will be very tired when it's over. And I will be ready to retire at 70. But that's, 9 years from now. And there's a lot of work to be done. And so I'm not pessimistic about it. I'm realistic about it. There will be days I'll hate it. But I won't give up. Because I've seen it work. I've seen it work. And it can work. And that's why I'm here. So let's not be completely pessimistic. Because that's not who we are as Americans. Oh, no, I meant this guy, but can we pass that? And I'll get to you next. I'm sorry.
I'm sorry. Governor, thanks for coming up.
Sure.
You've been here a lot. Continue to come back. We believe in you. This is great. Mike Megan, retired career military with my kid brother, public school civics teacher, Dan Megan. I couldn't agree more, and it's why I'm here. The front runner isn't fit for the office. The more difficult question, maybe a bit of a rhetorical question, is how do we begin to restore decency to the Oval Office? It's not an easy question. I accept, but I had to throw it out there.
Sure.
Thanks again for coming.
You're welcome, Mike. And thank you for your service, Mike. And Dan, thanks for teaching civics. It's good. It reminds me a bit of 2000. We had a president who had an affair with an intern in the Oval Office. No, not Kennedy. I said 2000. That was in the 1960s, for goodness sake. And I remember, well, Ted never made it to the Oval Office, thank goodness. And I remember that campaign in 2000, and I thought one of the most compelling parts of what George W. Bush said, and it was the end of most of his speeches, if you all were around here at that time and remember it, he would end his speeches by saying something to the effect of, when I win and I take the oath of office, I will not only promise to preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution, he said, but I promise I'll restore honor and dignity to the Oval Office. Right? He said it, and he did it. And it's whether you agree with his policies or you don't. President Bush, 43, his father did too, but we're talking about 43, he restored honor and dignity to that office. It can be done like this. All you need to do is have someone who has honor and has dignity and has integrity, who has the title. And they won't know any other way to act because that's who they are. And we need, again, a person there that not only can run the country, but can run their own family. I mean, the last two presidents haven't been able to run their own families, for God's sake. They're all on the grift. Looks like a banana republic, for Christ's sake. I mean, seriously, think about it. You know, Trump's there. Jared and Ivanka get $2 billion from the Saudis 6 months after they walk out of the job. They made $43 million a year while they were working in the White House. You trying to tell me that they weren't trading on the power they had to be able to walk up to the residents and say whatever they needed to say to the President of the United States? And now you got Joe Biden. His brother is on the grift, Jim. His sister's on the grift. His son's on the grift. And the First Lady seems to think Air Force One is her own personal plane to any sporting event she wants to go to. Look, be honest about President Biden. I've known him for 40 years. I went to the University of Delaware. I was the president of the student body there. I was on the board of trustees. And he was there. He was an alum. He used to come around to our tailgates at the football games and get beer from everybody. He's a perfectly wonderfully nice guy. Really was. But he lost control of his own family. And if I were his son right now, I would go up to him and put my hand on his shoulder and say, Dad, you've achieved amazing things in your life. You defeated Donald Trump. You became president of the United States. It's time to go home. What a loving son who's not on the grift would do is look at his 80-year-old father and how he's slowed down and how he can't function at that level anymore and say, I love you, so it's time to go home. That's honor and integrity too. That's putting the love of your father ahead of your own personal interests. And you want to restore honor and integrity? Then start by putting someone there who will set that example not only for the country, but start with their own family. We need to restore that in this country. And, you know, I'm spending all this time in New Hampshire because you're the folks who can make it happen. I don't want to hear you all bemoaning the horrible state of our country and, oh, woe is me, what am I supposed to do? You're the presidential wine tasters of America. decide. You get to decide before anybody else. I was a caucus. Only party members get to participate. This is a primary. Anybody who wants to come out and vote comes out and votes. And I don't want to hear that Donald Trump can't be beaten. I don't want to hear that you're defeated. I don't want to hear that we can't restore this country to what it has always been, but more importantly, what it could be. I'm not up here batting my head against the wall because I think these things are impossible. I think they're possible. But you're the ones who can make it happen. And so it's not just about you, it's about talking to everybody you know and telling them, look, it's okay to admit Trump turned out to be a bore. He turned out to be incompetent. He turned out to be, and yeah, Democrats have attacked him unfairly at times. And yes, he's been pushed in a corner by the media at times. That's all true. It doesn't make him a good person or a good president. And so we need to get back to that. You want to restore that? Elect someone who you believe will put their heels down and stand. That's what we need to do. I'm going to go back to that guy right there. Yes, sir.
Yes, thanks for coming. My name is Ed Cody. I'm a veteran. Seen a lot while I was there and affects me, on a daily basis. But having said that, I also have a son who just got deployed as far as the 2,000 man reactionary force. My question is, it's twofold. What are we when these guys get back, such as myself, about treating them, or better yet, informing them of where they can get their benefits done and possibly maybe a place for them to stay? I see too many veterans homeless. I hear lots of money going around everywhere, but I have yet to do about our veterans. My second part of this question is, with the way the Congress is acting, we're going to have a government shutdown. What's going to happen to our sons and daughters that are in harm's way that won't get paid? Not only they won't get paid, but more importantly, the families they have left won't see a paycheck either. How are they going to eat? How are they going to take care of their children? I haven't heard anything or any candidate address this issue.
All right. Well, we're going to break your streak. Let's start in reverse. There is no excuse for closing down the government. None. No excuse for it. You get sent there to run it, not to close it. And these folks on both sides who think that somehow that's a sign of strength, that's a sign of complete and utter weakness and failure. And so we've got to make sure they understand that. And by the way, they kicked Kevin McCarthy out because he made a deal to keep the government open. Think about that. And if you remember, Kevin talked about two things: that we have an obligation to do this, given that we were elected, and that I will not let our military men and women go unpaid. Those were the 2 points he talked about every time about why he made the deal, and these 8 lunatics kicked him out because of it. So what we need to do is, on that front, is to reward the people who are willing to do their job and punish the people who aren't. Now, if there are people in any congressional delegation that favor closing the government, the next election they should be removed. But also, we need to have a situation where term limits come into effect in this country. Now, it's going to be very hard to do, right? Very hard to do. But I was term limited as governor in New Jersey. You know, the fact is that you could pass a law that allows for term limits. Now, of course, it's the very people who use terms to be limiting who have to pass the law. But it's an example of why we should not be allowing these folks to stay there forever. Because the longer they stay there, the less perspective they have on what really is going on in the country. On your first question, I advocated for this 8 years ago, and I still believe it today. I think any man or woman who serves in the United States military and is honorably discharged should be able to get a card that allows them to seek medical care and treatment, both for physical and mental health issues, at any doctor they want to go to anywhere in this country. The VA does as good a job as they can under the circumstances. But we have folks in our military and who retire from our military who continue to have ongoing issues, as you alluded to. And those issues need to be addressed. And a lot of those issues are severe enough and in enough of a crisis that they can't wait weeks or months to get an appointment at the VA. They need to be taken care of quickly. And if we're providing health care to lots of other people in this country ahead of our veterans, our priorities are misplaced. And so to me, it would be very simple. If you leave the military and you're honorably discharged from the military, then you should get a card that allows you to go and seek treatment wherever you want for the rest of your life, given what you've given to this country by serving and putting yourself in harm's way and your family, because every day you serve, they serve too. No one can tell me that a spouse or a child is not feeling the effects of their spouse or father's service just as much as the person doing the service is, because their absence leaves a hole that cannot be filled. And the last thing they should have to worry about is whether they're going to have food on the table, or if they get sick, whether they go and see a doctor. The least this country can do for them is that. And so that's where I stood 8 years ago. It's where I stand today. And if I become president, that's exactly what I'll do. Yes, sir. They're coming to you.
Thank you for taking my question. So, in the United States, caregivers that are family members provide about $600 billion worth of care to their family members. I know I was a caregiver for my parents, who were 2 hours away for 15 years. It was a long time to drive 2 hours each way. And my wife was caregivers to her parents, and I know some of the other ones here were also caregivers. It's very, very common. And, you know, we need help when we're caregivers. We can't do everything ourselves. We get exhausted when you're caregiving for your wife. I just heard so many stories about how exhausted it is. I saw my father in his late 80s trying to be the caregiver for my mother, and just like exhausting him totally. So what help do you think we can give caregivers in this country?
Well, you know, I did an event, it was in Concord, I think, last week. And some of you, I think, were there and heard me talk about this. So forgive me for repeating it for the people who already heard it. But my dad just went through this. My mom died 20 years ago. And my dad got remarried, I think 6 years or 7 years after that. And my stepmom wound up getting Alzheimer's and being really debilitated by it. And for over 3 years, my dad was the sole caregiver for her. Even when she no longer remembered even who he was, couldn't remember what he was doing for her. And my dad is now 90. This was occurring in the years that he was 86, 87, and 88. And she looked fine. And my dad looked like he was going to die. He didn't have a moment to himself. He could never leave her alone. He had to get people to come and sit with her. He tried to get caregivers to come in the house. She rejected it. It disturbed her. They were strangers. and she wouldn't permit them in the house. She created such an atmosphere that they couldn't stay. So my dad was really on his own. And so I understand this personally because I watched it happen. And I was convinced that if we didn't get some kind of help, that ultimately it would kill him before it was going to kill her. And you know, it's a complicated issue, but it seems to me that we have to make sure that we rejigger Medicare to allow for and in fact reimburse appropriately in-home caregivers for folks who are suffering from diseases which make them unable to care for themselves. It could be a lot of different things. Alzheimer's obviously is the most obvious one, but there are also cancers that the treatment and the disease render people, so unable to help themselves that they need to have a 24-hour caregiver. And there's other diseases that do that. I worked on this regarding folks with developmental disabilities in New Jersey, where folks were defaulted to institutionalization, and I just didn't think it was appropriate. And we worked hard to change the system in New Jersey and make it much more home-based, but you have to provide the care you need in that place. So I know it can be done. And that's what we need to do, because we have a situation now where our population is aging. And the baby boomer generation is now aging, and they're our largest generation, and they're going to need help. And so we need to change the programs that we have available to us to take an emphasis out of in-institution care and put more of an emphasis on in-home care. And so it's not going to be, I don't think, more expensive, spending the money in a different way. And I think most people, if they can stay home, prefer to stay home, even if they're not exactly sure that still is their home. There is something familiar about it to them. And there is something comforting about that, not only to the afflicted, but to those who are participating in the care as well. And so having lived it, I understand it. And I think we can do that. We can change and reallocate the way these programs work to put more of an emphasis on that. I think it'll make the caregivers healthier, and it will make the afflicted more comfortable. And as a result, let them live the remainder of their lives in dignity. And that's what we should be shooting for, because that's what I certainly wanted for my dad and my stepmom. And if I want it for them, I shouldn't want any less for you if I'm your president. So that's the way I would go about it. Yes, ma'am.
So you said earlier about employment, that there's a lot of jobs available, but there's not a lot of people who either one can fill the job or don't want to fill the job. So I am one who wants to fill the job. I am a single mom who had to fight just to get to my graduate degree in clinical mental health, which means I have a lot of student loans. So how do you plan to work on reducing the student loan or increasing like grants and stuff to help for those student loans or for people like myself to go to school?
Well, there's probably little that I would do for people who currently have loans, but we need to deal with the future in terms of the cost of education. And what I've said all along is that any institution of higher education in this country that increases their tuition and fees more than the rate of inflation should not get any federal money at all. No grants, no loans, no research in investment, none of it. Because what they're doing is they're taking advantage of the fact that the American people want to be generous to help people get an education. So they make loans available and they say, well, we'll just keep increasing the price because you can just borrow more. And they're playing the system. The educational institutions are playing the system. And the people who are getting hurt are the people who take out the loans. And then have to pay them back. I took out loans because my family couldn't afford to send me. And it took me 10 years to pay my loans back. And I remember when I was married, and when the last loan payment was made, like that's when Mary Pat and I knew we could finally afford to buy a house, because it was a mortgage. So I know exactly what you're talking about and have been through it. And I think the only way to do it is to lower the cost of higher education. And the way to do that, I mean, look, I have our fourth child now in college. She goes to Notre Dame as an undergrad. I wrote the check a couple of months ago, I guess in August, for her first semester at Notre Dame. Her first semester at Notre Dame was $40,200. Right? So, you know, like how can you expect that people can afford to deal with this? And there is no reason it should be that expensive. It's a wonderful place. It's a great school, all the rest. Yep. She's getting good education. Yes. But it is completely out of control. And they increase these costs every year by well above the rate of inflation. So I think the way to go about it is to put a control on those costs and say, whatever the rate of inflation is, that's fine. I understand your costs go up. Someone has to absorb those costs. But I will tell you the other thing that strikes me as we watch what's going on some of our colleges' campuses right now and the growth of anti-Semitism that we're seeing. I look at these elite institutions, the Ivy League schools and others, that have tens of billions of dollars in their endowment. And what are they doing with it exactly? And they're certainly not giving money to someone like you to help you pay for your education in terms of grants, because they know you can take a loan and then they can keep all their money. So, you know, we need to go to the source of the problem. And the source of the problem, in my view, are those institutions, because they've been getting away with murder. They've taken advantage of the American people's generosity. And now, whenever we have an economic slowdown and people aren't making the kind of money or be able to get the kind of job they need, that's the only time that anybody starts to talk or think about it. We need to deal with this, and we need to deal with it at the source. Keep costs under control, then you won't have to borrow so much to go. And it won't take you as long to pay it back. I am not, though, in favor, I want to be clear about this, about forgiving loans. I just think it's the wrong message to send. And I think it's wrong for the people who decided to pursue another course, not go to school, go out and start to work right away, start their own business, do whatever. And now we're using their tax money to pay off loans that they didn't take themselves. So that's why I think the source of the problem is the cost, and that's what we need to go after that. I had a regular joke when I was up here 8 years ago that I went to one of the schools here and in New Hampshire, and they had a rock climbing wall. And I thought to myself, really? In the Granite State? We have to actually have a rock climbing wall? Go outside. You have rocks that you can climb. Lots of them here. I used it just as an example of the excess that's going on. The excess that's going on is unacceptable, and you pay for it. And it's not right. And so I think that's the only way to go about fixing the problem, because otherwise they're just going to continue to charge as much as you can borrow. And maybe they don't need like 18 vice presidents. That might help too. But I don't want to manage their business for them. That's not what Republicans do. I'm going to tell them these are the rules. And then you manage your business and spend your money on what you can. But inflation. If it goes over the rate of inflation, then you're not getting any federal money. And believe me, when they're threatened with not getting checks from the federal government, they'll get in line really quickly. That tuition will not go up nearly as much. So I wish you good luck. You got it. Quinn. Quinn, you are here. You have made it.
Thank you.
I didn't see you initially. I was concerned. I was worried. I thought you had been kidnapped by the DeSantis campaign and sent to a tunnel in Gaza. But luckily you are here. And it is your turn now to ask your regular evening question, whatever it will be. Welcome.
Appreciate it.
You're welcome.
So first and foremost, congrats on qualifying for the third debate. Look
Thank
forward
you.
to hearing your perspective. Thank you.
And thank you to all of you who contributed to me to help to make that possible. I appreciate it.
So, as you mentioned in your opening remarks, the third GOP nominee for Speaker just dropped out. The House currently looks incapable of governing. How can candidates possibly coalesce around one Trump alternative when they can't even pick a speaker? And what does this division at the highest level tell you about your party's health? Thank you so much.
Well, it's not very healthy in the House of Representatives, as I said off the top, Quinn, and part of that is because of gerrymandering, as you know. We gerrymander these House districts so that there's maybe only 50 competitive districts out of 435. And what that means is for the 385 that are not competitive, all they ever care about is a primary. If they don't get primaried, they're in. The Democrats don't have to worry about a Republican. The Republicans don't have to worry about a Democrat. This gerrymandering is destructive. It's destructive because no one has to come to the middle. And that's what you're seeing inside our own caucus, is that there is a fight now between those folks who are in the competitive districts who say, look, my folks sent me here to govern and they want me to do something, and not having a speaker is unacceptable. We need to get one. And then the people in the gerrymandered districts, which are the majority, who say, to hell with that. All I got to worry about is a primary. Gerrymandering is an enormous, enormous problem in helping to cause our governing divisions. And so one of the things that, it's like term limits, though. The only people who can fix it are the people who are benefiting from it. And if you think Matt Gaetz wants to be in a competitive district, you're crazy. Marjorie Taylor Greene in a competitive district? I don't think so. Matt Rosendale in a competitive district? No. Nancy Mace from South Carolina? No. Look, you're going to need a president who's willing to, put their fist down on the desk and say, we need to do something to fix this. And that's going to be hard. I will tell you right now, I can't guarantee you that I'd even be able to do it. Just can't. Because, what they care about more than anything else in the world is their title. Much more than what they've accomplished when they're in the job. They care about the title. They like people calling them congressman. They like people calling them senator. And that ego problem combined with the gerrymandering problem is a really tough nut to crack. Now, as it applies to this race, every day, Donald Trump's giving us more news and more information for us to decide to abandon him. And it happens quickly. I mean, think about just in the last 24 hours. Another of his lawyers, Jenna Ellis, has played in Georgia and agreed to cooperate and testify against him, not only in Georgia, but in the federal January 6th case. And then on my way here, news story came out saying that Mark Meadows, former chief of staff, has received immunity from the prosecutors and will testify against Donald Trump. Now, I want you to think about that. I will tell you a personal story about this. Because back in 2020, I played Joe Biden. I had to take some sedatives, but I played Joe Biden in debate prep for Donald Trump. And it was right around the time that he named Mark Meadows his chief of staff. And Trump called me. And he was on the speakerphone in the Oval Office, and he said, I want to introduce you to my new chief of staff. He's going to be the next James Baker. And it was Mark Meadows. And I said, geez, Congressman, at least he didn't set the bar too high for you. Only James Baker. My point in telling that story is that I guarantee you, now that Trump knows he's testifying against him, Mark Meadows will become a lying thief, according to Donald Trump. All of a sudden, he will become scum. Sidney Powell, who pled guilty last week, now he says, she was never really my lawyer. I barely knew her. Meanwhile, he put out tweets saying she was an important part of his legal team during 2020. Soon, I'm sure, he'll be telling us he didn't know Rudy Giuliani either. Hard time saying you don't know Mark Meadows. My point to you, Quinn, is that I know it's 3 months or so, until New Hampshire votes. It's a long time. Things happen like this now. Your generation is forcing this on us. You want to know everything now. You got your phone. You got your computer. You want to know it the minute it happens. And now you have the society you want. We do. We know everything like this. Can you imagine how many snapping fingers could happen in 3 months? And none of it's going to be good news for him. And you know why? Because he's a bad guy. And I used to say this when I was a prosecutor all the time. When my folks would bring me a case against a public figure, and it wasn't quite right. It wasn't ready. We didn't have enough. I would say no to the cases. And they would invariably, because these are young, aggressive prosecutors, and they'd want to bring the case and they believe in it. And they'd say to me, boss, come on. You know he's guilty. And I'd say, no, that's not the way it works. I don't know anything. It's what I can prove that matters. But what I used to say to him at the end of that was, but I promise you something. If he's as bad a guy as you say he is, because they don't change their stripes, he'll be back. And that's what's happening with Donald Trump. He has dodged law for years now. But eventually, when you keep breaking it, it comes back. This news today on Mark Meadows is the worst news that he could have ever gotten. And I've known him for 22 years, Quinn, and I can guarantee you tonight, when he goes to bed in Bedminster, New Jersey, 10 minutes from my house, 10 minutes, he is going to be lying in his bed, staring at the ceiling, trying to remember every illegal direction he gave to Mark Meadows. And so everybody who says, oh, the polls are this or that, and oh, how could it possibly be done? 3 months of snapping fingers from a guy who's a bad guy. And so my party will tell me a lot about itself at the only time it matters, and it's when they vote. I used to say to reporters all the time when they talk about my poll numbers in New Jersey, which would go up and down, and they were as high as in the 70s, they were as low as in the teens, and every place in between, because, man, I do stuff. And when you do stuff, people react either really well or really poorly. But I'd say to them all the time, I don't care what my poll number is, except on election. That's when it matters. All the time is just, running commentary on what people think of you from day to day. It shouldn't influence how you do your job. Do your job. I can't tell you what the state of my party is. I'll tell you after they vote here in New Hampshire, after they caucus in Iowa. Is that my alarm? Was that you? Does that mean it's time for me to stop and go home? No, okay. So what you need to, and we need you to do it more than you need any of us to do it. You've got to believe that you can make a difference. You've got to believe that facts matter. And as many times as you see examples of right now where you think it doesn't, I understand you questioning it. But, I got told this by a teacher in high school, my government teacher, and he was stealing it from somebody, I'm convinced, because he definitely was not this clever. But he said, remember something, Chris? He said, a small band of people committed to the truth can change the world. And I said, really, Mr. Hill? How do you know that? He said, because it's the only thing that ever has. And that's what we got to remember in this state, is it's the only thing that ever has. And so I don't sit here every day and navel gaze, Quinn, and go, oh God, what's the state of my party today? Like, I am the party. And maybe you will be someday too, when you get to vote and decide which party you want to be in and start to shave and all the rest of that. Maybe you will be. And I hope that you don't become a navel gazer, always pondering about what is the current state of whatever. Change it. And if you like it, preserve it. But don't ever give in to it. Ever. Stand your ground. I'm glad you came here tonight without your mother. That's pretty cool. Oh, is she here? I see. He texted me and he told me you weren't coming. Last minute. Did he badger you into it? He did. I figured as much. I'm so sorry. Good to see you here tonight, Quinn. All right. Was it Margaret Mead? Good. I know it wasn't my high school government teacher. That much I know for sure. Yes, sir, in the back. You had your hand raised, right? Yeah.
You mentioned term limits. Is Bill Belichick too old to be at the helm of the New England Patriots?
All right. I will tell you this. And this will get your attention. I am a Dallas Cowboys fan. Now look, I'm in New England, and you people are booing the fact that I'm a Cowboys fan. Are you kidding? All we've done is suffer for 30 years while you've been winning Super Bowls, and you're booing me? I'll tell you this, I'd take Belichick tomorrow. So if you want to give him to Dallas, we'll take him. We'll take him. Ah, he's a cheat, sure, who cares? I'm from New Jersey. But all right, so you want to know how did I become a Cowboys fan in New Jersey? 2 reasons. Number one, my dad was a Giants fan. And in the years I was growing up, the Giants stunk. And my father used to throw things at the TV on Sunday. And I'm like, well, I definitely don't want to root for whoever he's rooting for because they just get him angry. And 2, at 8 years old, I watched my first Super Bowl. And the quarterback for the boys was Roger Staubach. Captain America. And I just spoke to him 3 days ago. And one of the most amazing moments of my governorship was that's really literally why I became a Cowboys fan. I saw Roger Staubach. I thought he was great. And I became a Roger Staubach fan. He played for the Cowboys. So I was a Cowboys fan. I've been one ever since. But one of the greatest moments of my governorship was one day my secretary walked in and she said to me, NFL Films is on the phone for you, but they won't tell me what they want. I'm like, okay. So I get on the phone. Governor Christie, yes, this is so-and-so from NFL Films. We are doing a documentary called A Football Life on Roger Staubach. And we've been communicating with Roger about the film, and he wants to know if you'll be in it. And so if you can bear it, you Patriot fans, if you go and you go on YouTube and you look up Roger Staubach, A Football Life, and you go to just the last 2 minutes, you don't have to watch the first 50. I'm in a bit of the first 50, but in the last 2 minutes, they ask me about Roger Staubach, and I am the voiceover on some highlights of his. And I say in there, generally, I don't remember my exact quote, but it was something like this. I try to teach my children that there still are American heroes, and there still are people that you can look up to. And Roger Staubach is one of them. And I said, in the end, there are lots of different American heroes, but there's only one Roger Staubach. And that is the end of Roger Staubach, A Football Life. And it came out on a Thanksgiving day after the Cowboys game they had on NFL Network. And I made my entire family sit down and watch it. And it was one of the most exciting moments of my governorship. And Roger then sent me a football, an autographed football that said, "Governor, you're the best. Well done, Roger Staubach." And that still sits in my office today. So you want to get rid of Belichick? Bring him on, baby. We'll take him in Dallas. We've had some pretty lousy coaches. We'll take Belichick even as old as he is. All right. Yes, ma'am. Just get a microphone first so everybody can hear you. Oh, he's being too harsh.
So I went to one of your other events, and we talked about Social Security, and you said means testing. But in 2024, is going to be $168,000. That's the very top that you get taxed on, or you take that money and it's like the government takes it and puts it in an account for you,
Right.
basically.
That's the theory.
Right. So, but that's the top. So why is it not more? So that, I mean, there's a whole lot of people out there who earn more than $168,000 a year. So instead of means testing and say, even though you've put in for 30 years, guess what? You don't get any money. Why don't we just raise that rate, or everything that you earn, and then you get your money back and you feel good about it instead of means testing?
Well, here's what I'm concerned about with that. I'm not concerned about the people who are making like $5 or $10 million a year. I'm concerned about the people who are making between $168,000 and $500,000 a year. Because I'll tell you, in my state, like a couple making $300,000 a year are a cop and a teacher. And they're barely getting by in New Jersey, right? So I am programmed by my experience. And I don't think it would be fair to raise taxes on those people. I just don't. I don't think that, and you're going to have to capture them to get up to where you want to get to. Like, you can't put donut holes in all these things, right? You gotta, if you're going to lift the cap, you're going to lift the cap. And I don't think it's fair to lift the cap on folks who are essentially, in most of the Northeast, middle-class people. That's why I want to go after the wealthier people through means testing. Because if you've been extraordinarily lucky in this country and you've gathered, I'm talking about significant wealth, tens of millions of dollars in wealth, then do you really need to get 30? So for instance, if you've been able to save $15 million in your life, you retire and you have $15 million in investments in the bank, do you really need the Social Security check? Well, look, just because other people have sinned doesn't mean that we're allowed to continue to sin. Okay? I mean, you know, I got taught that by my parish priest a long time ago. Say, well, he did it, and he's like, yeah, well, doesn't exonerate you, son. We're in a different circumstance too. The system wasn't in crisis then; it's in crisis now. It's 11 short years, and then people will be facing a 24% cut in benefits. So I use the analogy, and I may have used it when you heard me last. People say, I put my money in, I deserve my money out. Well, first of all, within about 3.5 or 4 years, you get all the money out that you ever put in. But let's put that aside for a second. There's lots of government programs that you pay for that you don't have to get any direct benefit out of, right? So like, for instance, I've never been on food stamps. Incredibly fortunate, never been on food stamps. But I pay for food stamps with my sisters, as do you, every year. But I'm okay with that, because I don't want anybody in this country going to bed hungry if I can avoid it. And so if part of it is I'm paying so that someone who is less fortunate or just in a bad run of luck can have food for themselves and their family, I'm willing to pay for that because I've been successful. And I'm not getting a direct benefit from it. But what do I say? I want that part of my money back. I never was on food stamps. I think that we need to look at Social Security for what it was originally intended to be. And still is for tens of millions of people. It's a safety net. It's a safety net that makes sure that no one grows old in poverty. It's why Roosevelt started it in the beginning, because everyone's pensions were wiped out by the crash. And people were losing their homes, losing their possessions, and were aging in poverty. Social Security was meant to say, that will never happen again. And by the way, it's been a successful program. We generally don't have, there's always exceptions, but we generally don't have people growing old in poverty in this country. They can afford a roof over their head. They can afford food on the table. They can afford to heat or cool their homes. Those are the basics. Mark Zuckerberg doesn't need that, right? He's going to heat or cool his homes, plural, without ever having to worry about the Social Security check. Warren Buffett doesn't need it. Donald Trump doesn't need it. Okay? But I bet you he's collecting. He's 77. And so that's why I prefer means testing to raising the cap, because when you raise the cap, you're going to catch a lot of middle-class people in between who are, because remember, as you know, That's a big tax. I remember when our oldest daughter got her first real job after she graduated from college, and it was in Chicago, and she got her first pay stub and paycheck because they hadn't direct deposited yet. She hadn't gotten them all the stuff. And she called me and she said, I don't want to seem stupid to mom. She said, but who the hell is FICA? And I said, welcome to adulthood, sweetheart. FICA is for Social Security. So when you retire, you're going to get payments from Social Security. And she's like, I'm 22. And I'm like, yeah, we love you. You're going to be paying for a long, long time. So that's the way I feel about it. It's an argument and one that will be had when we do Social Security reform, no doubt, because I think Democrats will be in favor of lifting the cap. So it's going to be an argument that we have. So it's a perfectly valid question and a valid position. I just disagree with it, and I think the other way is better. All right. Yes, sir. Right in front.
This one will be easy.
Okay.
Now that I'm Speaker of the House,
Yeah. Congratulations.
thank you, and you're President, we have a
What a
mental
team
health,
we are.
We have a mental health problem in the United States. I need some ideas for the House here to pass something to reform it. What can you help us with?
Look, mental health is an issue that hits on the question that gentleman asked, our veteran. It's one that hits on all of the drug abuse issues that we have in this country. 110,000 people last year dying of overdoses in this country. It's now the leading killer among men 18 to 34. Oh, drug overdoses are the leading killer among men 18 to 34. And it's a huge contributor to our homeless problem, which he also mentioned in the context of veterans, but it goes beyond veterans. Here's the way I look at it, and there's a rhetorical way to deal with it and then a practical way to deal with it. On the rhetorical way, we have such a problem with both the provision of mental health treatment because we don't ask, because we don't talk about it. See, if a family member of ours gets cancer, we have no problem going to anyone and asking them, do you know a doctor? Do you know a hospital that deals with this? My loved one has cancer. My loved one has heart disease. My loved one has diabetes. No problem. Even though human behavior can and often does contribute to all of those diseases. Got no problem with it. But if a member of our family has a mental health issue, do we talk about it? Do we ask for help? In the main, no. It's still stigmatized. It's still like there must be something wrong with your family if someone is crazy. Just that word is pejorative and places a value judgment on it. It's a disease, like diabetes, like cancer, like heart disease. It is a disease. And a president needs to start talking about that and drug abuse in that way. It's not a moral failing. It is a disease that some people are more prone to, like some people have a family history of all those other diseases. And a president needs to be saying to people, it is not only okay to ask for help, it is wrong not to. Because people with mental health issues and drug abuse issues can be treated. And they can be helped. And they can be restored to normal life. But they got to first ask, or we have to help get them there. And both we fail on. That's rhetorically. And practically, look, we need to provide incentives to have more mental health care providers. Part of the problem is we don't have enough people doing it. And so it's very hard to get that treatment. It's part of what's going on with veterans for sure. And we need to give incentives for folks to go into the areas of medicine where we have shortages. I suspect we don't need any more dermatologists or plastic surgeons. When I look around this country, I think we got plenty of them. Seems to me. But psychiatrists, psychologists, counselors, we don't have enough. And so we have to, on the practical side, start incentivizing those people, Maybe it's forgiveness of student loans as part of the help if you're willing to go into that rather than into dermatology. You know, maybe that's the financial benefit you get. But we've got to be creative about it because in the end, those diseases are destroying lives and they're destroying our cities. If you look at our cities now, San Francisco, Los Angeles, Chicago, Philadelphia, New York, there's homeless everywhere, and Manchester. I mean, like any of the major cities in any state, there's homelessness everywhere. There's drug abuse everywhere. And we can't be a great country without great cities. And folks are being drawn to those places because they go. We need to do both. And it is, the rhetorical part is the easier thing to do, but it's going to take longer to convince people that that's the problem. I use this example all the time. My mom was an addict. She was a nicotine addict. She started smoking when she was 16 years old in 1949 when nobody knew that smoking was bad for you. In fact, they told you it was good for you. And she got hooked, and she smoked for 55 years. Until at 71 years old, she got lung cancer. And she died in 4 months. But when she got sick, we didn't hesitate to tell anybody that she was sick, even though they all knew she was a smoker. And nobody came to me and said, well, Chris, hell, she's getting what she deserves. I mean, she knew smoking caused cancer, and she still smoked. And so now she's got lung cancer, she's going to die, and she's getting what she deserves. Nobody said that. Everybody was compassionate. They cared. They helped her to the extent that they could, and they helped us. Because we told them that she was sick. If my mother had been a heroin addict, would I have told them? No shot. No shot. And because we didn't talk to anybody about it, it would have been harder to find help. And because it was harder to find, when you didn't find help, then she would have gotten sicker. And it just would have gotten worse. That's what we need to do on substance abuse and on mental health issues. We have to let people know. You know, we're supposed to be the pro-life party, and I'm pro-life. But you better be pro-life for more than just the 9 months in the womb. And when they come out, in my experience as a father, is when things really get complicated. Right? That's when all these issues come up. And every life is a precious gift from God. And the one facing mental health issues or substance abuse issues is just as precious a gift from God as the one that isn't. So we got to be talking about it. We can start to move our country forward into a place where we understand treatment available for this stuff, and we can help make it better. So I could take one more. Yes, sir, right there.
The time to give you my question. Most importantly, I want a future for my children and my grandchildren. And it's dependent upon the world's safety and the economy. And what I've taken a lot of notes. All right. But the toughest thing I can see for a president to handle is how the president is going to implement a successful strategy with all the things that are going on between Ukraine, Russia, Iran, Gaza, Hezbollah, China, Taiwan. Okay, I'm a global account manager, responsible supply chain. I've worked with factories in China, Thailand, Taiwan, Vietnam, and now, Philippines. So it's like I'm extremely worried about the global supply chain and how we're going to fix getting along with everybody to make the global supply chain work and be peaceful so that our children and our grandchildren have a future.
Look, it's your question absolutely points out what a lot of people in this race want to deny, that it's an interconnected world. Like, look, I think if I took a poll here tonight and I said, are you for America first? Then almost everybody would raise their hand. Like, No, he's for like America third, right? Like I go Netherlands 1, Belgium 2, America for a bronze medal, coming in comfortably in third place. Everyone's for America first. The question is, how do you get there? How do you keep America first? And the idea that somehow we can fill the moat and pull up the drawbridge and ignore the rest of the world as if they're not there ignores what the reality of the world we've built has become, which is a globally interconnected world where we have helped to grow our economy by interacting with other folks in the world, and they have helped to grow theirs by interacting with us. And so to do it, the only part of your question I quibble with is we don't have to get along with everybody, right? We're not going to. Like, I'm not going to get along with Vladimir Putin. He's a thug. He's a communist KGB agent. He ain't going to be my guy. We're not having dinner, all right? But what you have to do first, I think, is to make our friendships around the world strong and unshakable. So, you talked about, I gave a number of examples in Asia. So we now have great relationships with Japan, with Taiwan, with South Korea, with Vietnam. Good one with the Philippines. Good one with India, right? We have to make them understand that we are going to be their friend no matter what. That we're going to work with them to make sure that their economies are good and ours are good. First, shore up our friendships. I use Asia as an example, but the same thing could apply to our NATO allies in Europe, the G7, all the rest. We need the rest of the world, and the rest of the world needs us. And by the way, we always forget to talk about our own neighborhood. We live in the best neighborhood in the world. Despite the problems on our southern border, man, we don't wake up every morning wondering whether someone's going to invade us. I don't wake up in the morning and go, uh-oh, here comes Trudeau in Canada. They're coming. They're going to take Vermont. Maybe we should let them take Vermont. But nonetheless, we're not worried about that stuff. So we should first solidify our friendships. And that means sometimes doing difficult things to have to help them. Second, our adversaries, competitors, need to know that when we say something, we mean it, and that we don't begrudge them their growth as long as they do it fairly, as long as we're on an even playing field. So China's China. They're the second largest economy in the world. We helped get them there. And now they try to stick it to us every day. All right, we can be mad about it if we want. And there are times we should be. But what they need to understand is no more you're a growing agrarian economy that, hey, you're number 2 in the world. That means all the rules need to apply to you the same way they apply to us. And that is whether it concerns the fairness of trade, the protection of intellectual property, the climate, any of the things that people want us to do, they've got to be doing now. You want to be number 2? They want to be number 1. But if you're already number 2, no different rules now. Okay? You're on the same playing field as all of us. And they need to know that our real enemies, and I would put China in there, Russia, Iran, North Korea, they need to understand that we're not going to allow them to affect global trade in a way that injures us or our allies. So that means we're going to have a bigger Navy. Because right now, China's Navy is bigger than ours. And we cannot allow them to control the South China Sea and those shipping lanes, because if they do, they'll stick it to us. Right, and developing islands and putting runways on them and using them as military installations. Right, we've let that go. Obama let that go. Trump let that go. Can't let that go. We've got to tell them this is unacceptable, and if you're going to continue to do it, then we're going to start to reduce our trade with you. There are going to be penalties that are involved in it. It's complicated, but it's not hard if you're willing to be resolute about it. If you start making exceptions to every rule, then things start to get complicated and hard. But, well, of course we do. Well, of course we do. That's why I'm saying with the Chinese, like, I don't begrudge them their growth. Let them grow. But if you to reduce carbon emissions in this country so that the world can benefit, we've reduced them by 1 billion tons a year every year for the they 5 billion tons a year every year for the last 10 years. No, done now. You're not growing your economy anymore from nothing to something. You're number two. You got to play by these rules too. So yes, we did compromise with them for a long time and allowed them to indiscriminately steal our intellectual property, indiscriminately burn coal in a way that we knew was polluting the planet. We said, okay, we had our moments in the 1800s when we were doing that. We're giving them their time now. So we've compromised a lot with them now. And we'll still have to make some compromises as we go along the way. But we can't compromise our principles on things. And that's the difference. So yeah, compromise on individual issues, sure. You're going to have to. But, individual principles, though, that undergird our capitalist system can't be compromised. And they need to know that. And by the way, they already do. And on the stuff they like about us, they imitate us. They just don't like the freedom part. That one they're against. The free speech part, the freedom of religion part, they're not too keen on that. But, no. Of course. Look, that's why none of our social media companies are allowed in China, right? That's why I would get rid of TikTok. Not because I have anything really against TikTok, except that's theirs. We let them come in here and do whatever they want, but Facebook and Instagram and X and all the rest can't go there. Well, that's what I'm talking about in terms of fairness. Okay, you want a closed society? That's fine. Then take TikTok and bring it back there. We don't want it anymore. Unless you give our companies the same kind of access to your 1.4 billion people and all the rest of it that goes along with it, right? So these are issues that we got to deal with that are really important, but they're handleable if you show some consistency. You can't tariff every country in the world because guess what? You know who winds up paying for that? We do. Because the tariffs just lead to higher prices and more inflation. That's all they do. They make everybody feel good. They make, King Kong Trump bangs his chest and says how tough he was on somebody because he doesn't have to worry about paying for it. But people pay for it both out of their pocketbooks and with their jobs in some instances. So I think you're absolutely right that it's one of the key issues of this global problem is, and we saw it during COVID, didn't we? It got real complicated then. And that's also the last piece of it, which is there is certain stuff we now need to insource. There's certain manufacturing. Doesn't mean they can't do it anymore and we don't buy things from them. But we have to have the minimum that we need on certain things created here in this country. Because when we had a crisis like that and we didn't have protective gear and we didn't have certain drugs available to us because much of it was manufactured in China and they weren't giving it to us, we realized that we had put ourselves in a bit of a real problem. No, and we need to be a country that can mostly self-sustain. We're never going to be able to completely self-sustain, nor would we want to, because that wouldn't make us the most vibrant economy we could be. But on the necessary things that involve our national security and our health security, we should have options that we can execute. And there's a way to do that. But you got to have a plan. And you got to be willing to execute the plan. And it's going to cost something. But I think our corporations in this country, after the COVID experience, are more than willing to invest in that if we give them the opportunity because they realize how bad off they were when COVID hit. So now you were giving me like one finger up thing, which means one more question. See, now I'm breaking the rules, but I'll break them for you, yes. No. Is it yours?
Okay, I guess so.
Go here, take the microphone.
Thank you. There are predispositions here that I think are dominating our country, and we're segmented into buckets, sandboxes, which I think is the biggest problem. I don't think if you asked anybody here, they would have guessed you're a Cowboys fan.
they would have assumed, because you're from New Jersey,
Yeah.
you're X.
Giants or Jets, probably.
Giants or
Or
Jets.
Eagles, maybe.
Right. Next, this
God
is my
forbid.
fourth town hall with you. Next town hall, we'll start talking about Red Sox. We're not sure where you are with the Red Sox or Yankees or anything.
No, I'm not a Yankee fan.
Okay. All right. Well, then everybody here just voted for you.
I'm a Mets fan, and I apologize again for 1986. I said I was sorry. I didn't put Bill Buckner on the field in the ninth inning. You guys did, not me. Oops. All right, go ahead. We got that out.
I completely lost my train of thought.
Yeah.
No, so last question, appreciate it, is, you know, a lot of the themes here, again, this is my fourth town hall with you, there aren't a lot of policy questions. Like, what do you do about this? It's higher level, it's cultural, it's more threads that are more important about our country that seem to be dominating the questions that come to you.
Mm-hmm.
So this particular question is, and thank you again for taking the last one, is how is it possible? You're only one person. Granted, you may become the president, this amazing office, but you are still just one person. How do you sort of break down this, you know, again, people getting put into buckets that aren't necessarily representative of who they are, and they get almost chastised or pushed away because of that. You're Republican, oh, you must be this and this and this. You're a Democrat, you must be this and this and this. You know, Rachel Maddow, you know, is perfect at doing that kind of stuff. She just assumes that if you believe a certain thing, then you have to be this. I think we all perhaps feel, and again, the thread that I keep hearing is this kind of aspect of our country that seems to be dominating, perhaps mostly through the media. That creates a lot of our problems.
Mm-hmm.
Democrats, you talked about it earlier in Congress. I think
Yep.
this is an example of that. Is it possible to break it down?
Sure. And the reason it's possible is because we've done it before. Normally, the way it breaks down is when we have a real crisis. You know, 9/11, no one was talking about who was a Republican and who was a Democrat for months and months and months. Everyone was like, we're Americans. That's when we started putting these flags on our lapels. Everybody was like, the divisions that we have are small compared to people who fly airplanes into buildings and try to kill us. And so we have to stick together. So first, and this is not the preferable way, but one of the ways that happens is in a moment of crisis. World War II was another example. Nobody cared about who was a Republican or Democrat during World War II because all the blood that was being spilled in Europe and Asia was red. And it wasn't red or blue. It was just red. I think part of it is, and I hearken back to Reagan again, in part because he was my first vote, but also in part because I just finished writing a book about him that's going to come out in a few months, in February. And the title of the book's What Would Reagan Do? And, you know, I spent a lot of time working on the book, and so I kind of immersed myself in the things that he did. And he was far from perfect. But he spoke to a bigger America and not to its divisions. We have had too many presidents who have spoken to our divisions because it's what benefited them politically. That to divide people into those smaller buckets makes it a lot harder for everyone to get out of that bucket and oppose me. So if I divided them up into smaller groups, then it's hard to kick me out because nobody can really get together. Reagan never worried about that. He just went bigger and bigger and bigger. And what happened? When he ran for re-election, he won 49 states. Now, you say, can we bring the country back together? He won 49 states. We can't conceive of that today, that that's possible. But it happened, and it happened only 40 years ago. It was 1984. This will be the 40th anniversary of those 49 state win. I do believe, and I saw this happen in New Jersey. Okay, so it is one of the bluest states, if not the bluest state in the country. We haven't elected a Democrat to the United States, or a Republican to the United States Senate for 50 years. We have the longest streak of any state in the country not to elect a Republican to the U.S. Senate. 1972. For those of you who have been around that long, his name was Cliff Case, last Republican to win in New Jersey for the United States Senate. So I'm this Republican conservative of this blue state. I got elected the first time in a three-way race with 48% of the vote. So I didn't even win a majority of the vote when I first got elected. And what I said to my deputy chief of staff on our first day in office was, I'm going to give you a challenge. Send me everywhere, direct me everywhere to get us to 60% in 4 years. And he looked at me and said, you're nuts. And I said, let's try. Let's try it. So I did things like I did a town hall at a Baptist church in Irvington, New Jersey. Now, Irvington, New Jersey is like our 9th largest city. It is 93% African American. And in my first election, in a city of about 50,000 people, I got 349 votes. So I said to them, okay, let's go to Irvington for a town hall. And my deputy chief of staff looked at me and goes, really, Irvington? I want to just remind you that you got 349 votes there the first time. I said, I know, but see if there's anyone who will host us. So the guy who hosted us was the pastor of a place called the Love Baptist Church in Irvington, New Jersey. So the day we're going to do this town hall meeting, I show up to the side of the church, and I get out of the car, and my deputy chief of staff is standing there, and I said, so, what do you think? And he goes, well, he said, this is either going to be a great day for me or the last day of my employment with you. I don't know which way it's going to work, but go on in there and see what you got. So I came to the side door. The pastor met me. I thanked him for inviting me, and I said, so what kind of crowds do we have in there? He goes, standing room only crowd. There's 550 people in there. I said, okay. So I went in. He introduced me from the pulpit. I went up into the pulpit, and I got booed like you could not believe. I mean, just outright crushing me with boos. So I stood up, I let them work it all through, and then I said, thank you very much, and I want you to know something. Despite that welcome, I have already won today because there are more people in this room than voted for me 2 years ago. So I must be doing something to catch your interest. We went on for 2 hours and 40 minutes, and all questions, and yelling at me, and not liking certain stuff I did. And by the end of it, about a third of the audience applauded. Okay. So what's happened in 2013? In 2013, I don't win Irvington, but I get over 2,000 votes in Irvington from 349. And I get reelected with 61% of the vote statewide, 51% of the Hispanic vote, 28% of the African American vote. Against a female opponent, 58% of the female vote. You can do this. You just have to go places where you're uncomfortable. You have to talk to people who disagree with you and listen to them. You have to let them know that you care about what they think, even if you disagree with it. You have to show them respect. It can be done. It's been done. And it can be done again. It just isn't comfortable. Believe me, when I walked into the Love Baptist Church and they're booing the hell out of me, it was not comfortable. I can speak now, 11 years later, in a jovial manner about it, but when you're getting crushed up there and you're used to everybody rising when you come into the room as governor, right? This is a different sensation and it's not pleasant. But I was building towards something. I wanted to build to a place where the state felt like I was everybody's governor. If I become president, I want to use the 4 years I get to do two things: to achieve things of consequence and to bring the country together. And if I could do those two things, whether I get 4 years or I get 8 years, will probably not matter all that much to me. When I did this stuff in New Jersey and people said to me, you're not going to get reelected. And I'd say, I don't really care. And they would press me on it and say, did you care? If you've been to a few of these, you probably heard this before. But I said, I don't care because I already get the portrait. Like once you get elected once, they actually paint a portrait of you. And they hang it in the State House forever. My grandkids someday, hopefully, will be able to come there and see, look at the old man. He was not always crazy. Look at him. He actually did something. I said, that's it. I get the portrait. All we're arguing about is the little brass plaque. And whether it says 4 years or 8 years. That's all we're arguing over. I'm not going to sell my soul for 4 more years on a little brass plaque. And you got to think that way every day in these jobs. And if you do, you have a chance of breaking through. You may not. And it may fail. Because we're human. But that's the mindset you have to have. And I believe that's what Reagan felt. And I think that's why he broke through. And we haven't had a president since then who thought that way. And that is why we need to do something different here. And it's a good place. I'm glad I took the extra question. And I thought it was yours. If it was his, I wouldn't have taken it. I was going to take yours, but it's okay. I know. I've gotten the bait and switch thing before. It's all good. It's a good place to end. Like, look, I'm counting on you. I'm going to be honest with you. Everyone else, by the way, has left for Iowa, as you can see. Tim Scott announced yesterday, moving everybody to Iowa. Right? Ron DeSantis came here today just to make sure he touched base. He's back to Iowa. Right? Trump's in Iowa. He's here for a day yesterday. Out of here. Filed for the ballot. Got out. I'm here, and I'm not going anywhere. And I'm counting on you. Because as I said off the top, this is the fairest, most open primary for president in the country. And you all are going to get to decide. And I'm not naive. 8 years ago, you picked Trump. I was on the ballot. I get it. I was here. But it ain't 8 years ago. We know a lot more now than we knew then. He was the guy from TV who said you're fired and was rich and had the beautiful wife. Okay. And he was running against Hillary. Okay. We went, well, we know her. We don't know him all that well. All right, how bad could it be? Well, now we know. Now we know. Look, I picked Mary Pat a long time ago. Well, I feel like a really good scout in baseball. I got her when she was young and she didn't know any better. Signed her up for a lifetime contract and it's worked out all right. But I'm counting on you all to do this. I'm not going to give in. I am who I am. And I'm going to keep giving it to you straight. And it's either going to work or it isn't. But you're not going to say you didn't have a choice. Everybody else on that debate stage raised their hands and said they would support a convicted felon for president of the United States. I'm the only one still in this race who didn't. Go to a Ron DeSantis town hall and ask him, why'd you raise your hand and say you'd support a convicted felon for president of the United States? Go to a Nikki Haley town hall and ask her, if she's so independent, why'd she raise her hand and say she'd support a convicted felon? You can't have it both ways. You either think what he did was wrong and he's unfit for the office, or you're with him. And if you're with him, what the hell are you doing in the race? Drop out and endorse him. But the defining question of this election is Donald Trump fit for office or isn't he? And if you believe he is, what are you doing in the race? I know him better than anybody in this race. I've known him longer than anybody in this race. And I know he's not fit to be president. And I got into this race because I could not stand by and allow him to get this nomination again and to have the chance of him taking this country down a road from which we might not be able to recover, nor could I stand the idea of Joe Biden being president again. And Mary Pat finally looked at me and said, well, stop talking and do something. And that's why I'm here. So, thank you for coming tonight. Thank you for what you do. Thank you for being concerned about this country that your time. on a Tuesday night to spend a couple of hours with me. I will be here every week between now and the primary date. I ask you to not just come yourselves, but recruit others who need to be converted. We need to win this one voter at a time on the ground here. We could do it. I know there's a lot of people who agree with us, but are afraid to speak up. Bring them here and let's together give them the courage to take our country back. Thank you all very much.